Here. Welcome to another episode of Fast Tracks Live. On this episode, we're going to be looking at Article 220.83 for existing dwellings. And what we're going to be looking at is how we approach it now in the 2023 NEC and how it's going to possibly look in the 2026 edition of the NEC. And what it's doing is clearing up some confusion that people have when it comes to existing dwelling unit calculations. Now, we're not going to be talking about 220.87 or about doing a year's worth of data and determining service. What we're talking about existing dwelling units and how we treat them if we're going to be adding new circuits to it in order to determine whether or not the existing service has enough capacity to be able to handle any new loads that we want to add. That's what we're going to be looking at. So we're just going to kind of take an overview of 220.83. If you want to get really in depth in it, I encourage you to become a part of our Fast Tracks program. You can come on Wednesday nights every 2 weeks. We talk about just about anything, and we can talk about this topic. Or you can become a Fast Tracks Tube subscriber, and you also get access to our bi-monthly meetings on those Wednesday nights and ask questions, and we'll do our best to kind of clarify things. It's a great way to connect with other like-minded individuals. And also remind you that over on our website, which the URL is right there, we have a new what's called groups feature, which allows you to post questions and interact as well. So make sure you check that out. All right, so let's go on and look at the code. So this is what we see as far as existing dwelling applications go. All right, so again, painting the picture, this is if you already have a dwelling and now you're going to be maybe adding additional loads and you want to know whether or not the existing service has enough potential capacity to handle whatever new loads that you want to present to it. So here is 220.83, existing dwelling units. It says this section shall be permitted, so it's permissive statement, permitted to be used to determine if an existing service or feeder is of sufficient capacity to serve additional loads. It says where the dwelling unit is served by a 120 240 volt or a 208 Y 120 volt 3-wire service or feeder, calculating the total load in accordance with 220.83A or B shall be permitted. Okay, so before I even look at this, a lot of myths that are out there say that you have to use. You're permitted to do this, but you know what you could do? You could actually recalculate the load again as if you're starting from scratch, take all of the appliances, take all the variables that you would have in normally sizing a service, add in your new loads and do it as if everything is new. And that can determine on what's the size of the service and compare it to what you already have. So this is permissive to do this, but a lot of times it might be just as easy to just do the whole calculation again. That's totally, every situation is going to be different, but know that you do have a permissive allowance here, or you have the traditional just going and calculate it out. And you could use a standard, which is part 3 of 220, or you could use the optional method, part 4, and it becomes much easier. The only hard task that you have in doing a calculation, and I talk about this all the time with students, is you have to go around and gather the information. So you're going to have to be like a little bit of an investigator to determine, all right, how many small appliance circuits are here? Is there a laundry circuit? All those type of things. You got to know the square footage, the outside dimensions, that part. You have to kind of look at those things and compile everything, the ranges, things like that. If there's a dryer, and you can do it. It's not difficult. We do it all the time, but you may have to do that. So that means you're going to have to go around the house and start taking nameplate values from things like garbage disposers and whatnot. But anyway, that's just the normal practice. The thing about that is you're still going to kind of have to do that anyway when you're doing the existing dwelling calculation. So you might as well just do a full calculation. But anyway, let's look. Okay, so you see this is broken down into an A right here, and it is broken down into a B. Okay, So let's talk about the significant differences here. Now, this is where a lot of confusion came in. And I've argued this for years that I needed them to be a little more clear. And 2026 is actually going to be much clearer, but it still makes sense, right? If you have loads in the dwelling, I mean, you have to account for those. You just can't say, oh, well, there's no nice, nifty place to put these loads. I don't have to account for them. Well, no, you still got to account for them. So if you look at this one, A, it says where additional air conditioning equipment or electric space heating equipment is not to be installed. Notice that it says additional. So if there is existing air conditioning loads or existing electric space heating, you still have to account for those. Okay, so a lot of people got confused with that and said, "Well, no, I'm not adding additional ones." And if you go down and we're going to look at the list here, they're saying, "Well, if I'm not adding additional ones, then I don't have to account for the ones that are already there." But you do have to account for the ones that are already there. All right, so let's look at it here. It says the percentages listed in table 220.83a, and that's this table right here, shall be used for existing and additional new loads. All right, so what does this actually say? I'll just scroll back and forth a little bit for you. You can see the whole thing. It says when you're going to apply these rules down here that we're going to look at down here, it says the first 8 kVA load at 100%. Right? So the first kVA, you just take it at 8 kVA. That's 100%. Okay, so first 8,000 VA. Everything that you calculate or add up that's over that, then you're going to have a reduction. You're going to take it at 40%. Okay, so nice hefty allowance. This is pretty similar to what you get when you do the optional method for a single dwelling, right? It's pretty similar. The only difference is here it's at first 8,000, whereas in an optional method, it's the first 10,000 and then the remainder at 40. But here it's the first 8. That type of thing is 100%. So that's really the only significant difference there. Now, when you're looking at that dwelling, you're still, it's existing or not. This is why I, talked about at the beginning about saying, well, maybe you just do a full calculation and see what it would be as if you were building this house new. But it's kind of the same concept. First thing you got to do is you calculate the general lighting and general use receptacles at 3 VA per square foot as determined in 220.42. I'll click that so you can kind of see, and a little bit of it will pop on the screen. Again, this is where it talks about lighting for non-dwelling loads, yada, yada, yada. But not really, significant for us here. So again, it's still, the key is 3 VA, general use, general lighting, general application. Okay. Now, and also not to roll it down, but this is also, when you scroll down, you'll notice that all of these things in here are typically not for single family dwellings. So you'll see why that makes a difference or how that's fixed in the next cycle, but it doesn't matter. It's still 3 VA per square foot. All right. Next is your small appliance brand circuits. Again, 1,500 for each 2-wire 20 amp small appliance brand circuit. So if it's an existing dwelling, you're going to have to go and see how many small appliance brand circuits they actually have. Right, so that's important. And of course, laundry circuits as well. So if you've got 2 small appliance brand circuits, which is the minimum, keeping in mind that a house that was built many, many, many years ago may not have the minimum of 2 small appliance brand circuits, depending on how old it is. And that's probably a real old service anyway. Okay, one of those old 60 amp bad boys. Okay, so keep that in mind. But again, got to account for these loads. They're there, so you still have to account for them. And then the next really is the simplicity of it is the nameplates. Just go gather all the nameplates. So all appliances that are fastened in place, okay, go around and get all those. All appliances that are permanently connected, gather those. All appliances that are or located to be on specific circuit. So this would pick up all those things like your air conditioning, your heating. Those are appliances and they're on specific circuits for those loads. This would also be where you would pick up anything like an EV charger or something like that, which you're taking at the nameplate, and all this other stuff. Okay, you're picking up all of these loads under this method. Okay. Now you're also going around and just because you're just taking nameplates is what it says here. Ranges, same way. Go pick up your load for your ranges. They all have nameplates on them. Your wall-mounted ovens or counter-mounted cooking units. You're just going to be a nice little sleuth and go around and gather all that info. Clothes dryer, the same. Again, we're not talking about the laundry circuit. That was covered up in item number 2 right here. So we're not talking about that. So specific circuit, 30 amp circuit for your dryer, that type of thing. And then, of course, any of the water heaters that you have. Okay. So what we're doing is we're simply taking the actual nameplates of all of these. We're adding all of this up. And remember, this is where people get confused. If there is existing heating and cooling, you go and you add that information as well into here. That all falls under 3, and more specifically 3A of the 2023 edition of the National Electrical Code. Straightforward, right? Makes sense. And that's what's going to determine whether or not you have the capacity. So basically, this is just like an optional method, that type of thing. Now, since you have to gather all of the information anyway, then you might find that you're better off doing the optional method anyway. Okay, and that means the first 10,000 is at 100%, and then remainder at 40. But this method might be a little smaller because only the first 8,000 is at 100%. Okay, so if it's existing, you're permitted to do this. Okay, so you could go back and use the optional method or even the standard method, but you're permitted to do this. This might yield something that's going to work out better for you. Now, B differs from A in that this is a case where you may be adding other loads, right, to determine if this existing service is adequate. You may be adding other loads, but in this case, maybe you're adding an additional room and you're going to be adding additional air conditioning capacity or additional electric space heating capacity. So you're adding additional, okay? Well, you have to remember that in that scenario, you want to take all of the existing information, right? Just like we just did. So nothing changes from what we just did above. The only thing that's changing is that you do all of that calculation just like we just did. But now if you have additional air conditioning equipment, you take it at 100%, or you have central electric space heating, you take it at 100%. Or if you have less than 4 separately controlled space heating units, you take them as 100%. So what that means is you're taking the additional air conditioning or heating or the separately controlled space heating all at 100%. But you're only taking the larger of those, okay? So that's what it tells you up here, right? It says the larger connected load of air conditioning or space heating, but not both shall be used. Does that seem pretty similar? Right, so that's kind of the same way we do what? When we're doing the optional method where we look for the larger the heat or the AC, that type of scenario. Same scenario here. Easy thing to remember is heating or air conditioning, they're all just taken at 100%, and whichever's larger, that's the one you take. And you add that to the calculation that you did similar to what we just did in A. There's no difference. It's just now you're adding the additional loads for B, okay? So that's all you're really doing there. Now, in the 2026 edition that's going to be coming out, now the problem with A and B is that it's been argued that B would be a situation where if you were to wait until something considered existing, then you're able to incorporate the air conditioning or the heating, whichever's larger, into this method A, and you get to apply the 40% to it. So you're going to get a greater demand than if you went down here and added additional air conditioning loads over and above what was already there. Then you have to take those new ones at 100%. And so again, there was arguments on whether or not this could be gamed and how you were to choose to use it and all that type of scenario. And this was example down here, B, where you may just say, well, screw this. I'm just going to do an optional method, or at least compare it, right? And, see what happens. See which one yields the better result, right? Okay, so let's kind of look now. I'll give you kind of a look at what it's going to look like in the 2026 edition. Now, hopefully this is not confusing. The easiest way I can tell you is to just do the optional method like in part A, as you normally would in this example, and then take the heating or the air conditioner, whichever is larger, and then add that at 100% and add that to the totals that you got when you did the first 8,000 at 100 and the remainder at 40. And then after you get a value, then you add your AC or heat to it at 100%. Okay. All right. So that's the way you do it if you're going to add additional heating and air conditioning loads. If there's no additional, then you just follow A, and all you do is just gather all the appliances, gather everything up, and gather the new stuff like EV chargers or a new circuit that you're adding or something for some appliance and add that in. Okay, should be simple, straightforward. All right, so now let's go look at what they're proposed to look at right here. Now, it might be difficult for you to see it, so bear with me. So what it's saying is, now you notice something different here. It's not broken up into an A or a B, but it makes more sense because of the diversity aspects of it. So it says, now I'll read it for you. It says, this section shall be permitted to be used to determine the existing service or feeder is of sufficient capacity to serve additional loads where, that's important, where the dwelling unit is served by 120 240 volt or a 208Y 120 3-wire service or feeder. It says the percentages listed in table 220.83 shall be used for existing and additional new loads. The larger connected load of an air conditioning or space heating, but not both, shall be used. Okay, so pretty straightforward, same as it was before. Now, let's look at it. Number one key difference is you notice that the VA per square foot dropped. It's 3 VA in the previous, but in the 2026, it's proposed to drop down to 2 VA per square foot. Okay. Next is still going to have your small appliance brand circuits at 1500 VA for each one of those. The same for the laundry. That doesn't change. You'll notice that they got rid of the reference in there. The 220.42 doesn't make sense and probably was a bit of a typo there. But anyway, didn't make sense, but y'all get it. And in the third, you see the same thing. 3A is the same thing. It says all appliances that are fastened in place, permanently connected, or located to be on a specific circuit. That didn't change, right? The next one, B, is ranges, wall-mounted ovens, counter-mounted use. So just gather that info. C, clothes dryers that are not connected to the laundry circuit. Makes sense. D is water heaters. Same. So far, everything looks pretty much the same, except for we dropped the 3 VA down to 2 VA, right? And then they added an E, and E says electric vehicle charging equipment supplied by an individual branch circuit. Okay, so you're going to go to that EV, you're going to go, and again, we're pulling what? We're pulling nameplates, right? So, because again, you see up here in 3, it says nameplates for the following. Don't overcomplicate it, just pull the nameplate. Now, how do you apply this? Look at the bottom here. Here's where it's different. First 8 kVA of existing in new loads, 100%. So the same thing, first 8, 100%. So it's going to be 8 kVA to start off, right? The remaining of the existing loads at 40%. Then if you're adding any new EV to this, okay, new EV, then notice it says new EV. So if you're adding new EVSE to this, you take it at 80%. If you're adding a new central electric resistant space heating, again, this is new. Remember, if it was existing, you're already adding it in the top part anyway. So if it's new, and that's why it's important you see the word new in there, new electric resistant space heating, you take it at 80%. So whatever its nameplate is, you're going to take it at 80%. And then all other loads that you'd be adding, all other new loads that you would be adding, then you're going to be taking them at 50%. So it's graduated down, all right? So you take all of these existing loads, you do the top, tells you how to address them, right? And then what you've got is, if you're dealing with a brand new EVSE, then you're going to have a reduction of 80% of the nameplate. If you're going to have a new central resistant space heating, then you're going to have 80%. If you have all other new loads, and when we say all other new loads, this could be air conditioning, right? If you have air conditioning as an other new load, because you notice that it's not down here, right? Then that would be at 50%. And so this is how they graduated all of this into the new way to do it. So what we're doing here is simply giving you the ability to, in the 2026, we're going to say, okay, well, I have all of my existing loads. That's the first part. Then that's the part that I'm going to apply to the first 8,000 at 100%. And then the remainder over that at 40, that's existing. And then if I've got any new EVSE, I'm going to take it at 80% and add it to that number. If I've got any new central electric space heating, I'm going to take that at 80%, add it to my total. Or if I have any other new loads, whatever they may be at their nameplate, boom, I'm going to add it to what? The base amount that we did with the first 8,000 at 100 and the remainder at 40. And then I'm going to add these other new loads to that sum based on their percentages. Okay, does that make sense? So that is how it's going to be moving forward in 2026. I don't see anything that could railroad that in this application. The weird one is that 3E, which is the EV, kind of implies that that's existing. And then, of course, it also says if you're adding any new EV or additional ones, as we're starting to have EV expansion, then the new ones you get to reduce at 80%, right? So again, that's how you would address it. So I think that this maybe simplifies how it's approached. Some of the wording may change a little bit. I think if I had to make a recommendation, and I probably will for the public comments, is it make it clear down in the bottom, the new EVSE, the new central electric space heating, or the new other loads, make sure that in parentheses we put nameplate, because then it's going to be room for somebody to say, oh, well, it's not the nameplate, that type of thing. Because somebody could argue that it was this new EVSE, the 80%, but they'll argue that you're supposed to take it in accordance with 625, EV circuits at 125%, and then you apply that's not what's meant here. So maybe it should be clear that we're talking nameplates, and maybe it is clear to most people, right? But the word nameplate only appears under 220.83.3, not under part of the table. So it might be nice to put that out to the side of any of those ones that say new or other new loads. It might just simplify in people's minds. I don't know. What do you think? So remember, you're going to have the ability to public comment on this. This is just for your records. This is FR 8188. If you want to put in a public comment, it's FR 8188, and you want to make it better. We're always trying to make the code better. I think the code panel did a great job here, simplifying it. It's pretty much not saying anything that's not new, that is new, but they are now allowing for some percentages. And this is all based on some of the public inputs and some of the comments. I mean, not comments, but other public inputs that came in. There was multiples to try to fix this a little bit, make it simpler. Getting rid of that A and B makes it simple, I guess. Maybe the way I explained it earlier, it's now simple for you, but now it's just maybe a little more simpler to understand. All right, folks, hopefully you got something out of that. Again, always feel free to leave a comment. And if you want us to do other videos clarifying things, do me a favor, drop us a line at support, SUPPORT at fasttracksystem.com. And I'm more than happy to look at future videos for you. Until next time, folks, stay safe. God bless.